Here's Brody Brazil.
So after the last 4 to 5 months of delay and question and speculation, we now finally have some official renderings from the A's for Las Vegas and the brand new ballpark project they want to build. You've likely seen these 4 images floating around. They also come with some textual descriptions of what the team is hoping to do with this ballpark project. But I want to get to all of that first, and then by the end of this video, I'll give you my most compelling takeaways, like the things that we now know because of these 4 images and the questions that still remain in relation to this project. One question straight away, and it's more like a curiosity here, that one part of the ceiling structure that's all neon green, is that all one video screen? This is an interesting perspective from behind home plate. Certainly that is a traditional type jumbotron out there in right field, although it is curved, which would make it less traditional, but it looks like the whole ceiling is that color green for a specific reason. So definitely some things here that are eye-catching and attention-getting. And yes, it absolutely does look like the Sydney Opera House from the exterior. I think that's most people's first reaction. That'll be a takeaway. More on that in just a second. This image, I think, is from the other side of Tropicana, looking across to the stadium and then looking across Las Vegas Boulevard to seeing the Excalibur. There is no depiction, though, of what Bally's and GLPI plans to do by building their new resort on the other 26 acres here. More on that in just a second. Here's what the A's said in a release about the project in these renderings. Quote, shaped by its location on the Las Vegas Strip, the 33,000-person capacity ballpark provides an outdoor feel with views of the city's skyline. The tiered design will split upper and lower seating bowls to bring fans closer to the action than traditional ballparks and provide clear sight lines from every seat. They also go on to say the roof's 5 overlapping layers, whose design is inspired by traditional baseball pennants, open to the north to allow for natural light and views up the strip, while also limiting direct sunlight and heat from the south. The outfield features the world's largest cable net glass window facing the corner of Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevards. The ballpark is currently designed to include an 18,000 square foot jumbotron, which would make it the largest screen in Major League Baseball. The ballpark plan supports up to 2,500 on-site parking spots, as well as a 2 to 3 acre plaza that starts in the northwest corner of the site and extends to the ballpark's main concourse. The overall parking plan will be determined in partnership with Bally's and GLPI. Bjarke Ingels and his Bjarke Ingels Group have also, by the way, been named the lead architect for this project in the ballpark. Here's what he said about the design. Quote, the resultant architecture is like a spherical armadillo shaped by the local climate, while opening and inviting the life of the strip to enter and explore. In the city of spectacle, the A's armadillo is designed for passive shading and natural light. The architectural response to the Nevada climate, generating a new kind of vernacular icon in Vegas, end quote. And that might be the most fancy paragraph I think I've ever read. Here's a view from, I suppose, the northwest, looking to the southeast, that plaza area, which also looks very similar to round 1 of renderings we saw from the middle part of last year. But again, none of this really has the surrounding area or parking lots. Where are those 2,500 spaces? None of that really visible here. Again, you'd have to imagine for these 4 images, there's also a dozen or so more that simply were not part of this release for whatever reason. And then I believe this would be the view from across the Las Vegas Strip looking towards the east. I think that's the MGM on the other side. A lot of palm trees getting in my way of seeing what else is out there, but they're trying to just show an idea, a concept, a depiction of this structure. So let's get to the takeaways in no particular order, but this kind of seems basic and foundational here. Bjarke Ingels Group, you may recall, they were the ones behind the Howard Terminal renderings, and everybody loved those. And Bjarke Ingels Group has never designed a Major League Baseball stadium before. There's a company out there called Populous, which does almost all of them these days, but the A's have always wanted to go a little bit of the non-traditional route. And I would say, to their credit and to the favor of this is definitely a non-traditional design. I would also say that these renderings, as opposed to the last round from last year, these ones have a lot more of a polished appearance. Now, there are some weird little intricacies. Like if you look at, I think, the center fielder in that home plate rendering, that center fielder's leg is bending some crazy direction. And the home team's jerseys, it should be the A's, I think they're just wearing black and white. Like there's no green and gold. And some fans are wearing different jerseys and sunglasses that all do crazy things. Like there's a lot of AI as part of this rendering. But again, that's the nature of things, I guess, here in 2024. But overall, they look very polished. And yes, the building absolutely looks like the Sydney Opera House. There's no confusing that. In fact, Sydney Opera House was trending earlier today on X/Twitter. And there's an obvious reason why. I don't think anything else happened in Australia today or overnight right now. Like people are making that instant comparison, and I can absolutely see why. How about the timing of this? Big League Weekend is this Friday and Saturday out in Summerlin. That's where the A's play an MLB opponent for spring training games. They do this annually. This year it's the Brewers. But again, that's this Friday and Saturday, essentially in Las Vegas. Now, initially back in December, the A's had planned a release event. It included local politicians and the governor, and they really wanted to make this, I think on December 3rd or 4th, a celebration of the release of renderings. And obviously in this case, today, here on a random weekday afternoon, there was no real release event. I don't know that anybody saw this coming. And maybe this will be tied to some other things the team will do over the weekend, but they chose not to make this an actual event, the releasing of them. We'll see what they do with the renderings moving forward as part of the weekend. But obviously it helps them get ahead of the weekend they're about to have in Las Vegas by putting out these renderings. You can imagine the types of topics and questions and conversations that come up because these renderings are out are going to be a lot more detailed now than if they hadn't come out by Big League Weekend. Another takeaway would be this, that the future Bally's sports-themed resort and casino, which we know is going up on the remaining 26 acres, like that's why they're part of this project, none of it is depicted on these renderings. And pretty much every other rendering that you would see, like from the Chicago White Sox who have a new planned ballpark, from the Kansas City Royals who have a new planned ballpark, from the Tampa Bay Rays who have a planned new ballpark, they always give you the overhead view of how things sit, where they stand, other structures. In this case, it's interesting because all of the renderings are ground level, and you can not really tell what else is going to happen on the rest of the site. I mentioned the parking spaces, but what about the high-rises that Bally's and GLPI are definitely going to need to build there for their casino and resort? And the delay was reported that the A's weren't ready to put out their renderings yet because they didn't know what Bally's and GLPI was going to do. And then Bally's said they weren't sure what the A's were going to do. Well, I guess it doesn't matter now, kind of water under the bridge, because here we are and something has been published. But it doesn't necessarily answer one of the biggest questions out there. What else is going to happen on this site? Is this a 9-acre project, and does it fit into all of the other confines of the project? We can take away this, I think for sure, which has been explained now in pictures and in words, that it's not a retractable roof. It's a fixed roof, which is confirmed. Now that goes against what was promised last year in the legislative session by the A's, but certainly looking at cost and construction and how much they'd actually use the building open or shut. For a lot of different reasons, this is a totally different route. But I think we can all take away that this is something different than even a year ago, and one of the main kind of backbones of the project. It's going to be a roof that does not open and shut. You'll also notice in the renderings that there are no lighting structures. They are going to use those glass windows for more natural light during daytime hours. But what about the night games? How exactly does that go? And how about light emission from the building, from the inside, looking out? Now, those glass windows do face away from the airport, and that was a concern and consideration of the airport to not have baseball stadium lights in such a close proximity. So a lot to be determined there. But like I said, the big takeaway is that the roof is fixed and there is that big glass wall structure out in left field. And again, all of this ends any speculation of the extra cost involved to build a retractable roof structure. Certainly, that's an area to save probably a couple $100 million, and maybe even timing of delays in construction. It's a much more simplistic project because you don't need to build a roof that opens and shuts. As I mentioned before, these 4 images, they do lack the overhead perspective and proportion to understand where everything else sits, what else is going on here, and does that ballpark actually only take up 9 acres? Does it look a lot more gigantic on the image versus what you might expect in real life? Again, what is the proportion to real life? To the rest of the site, which is 35 total acres, but is it deceiving or realistic, or how does that actually go? It's hard to tell because we don't have any aerial views of it. They're all ground level, and maybe the proportions aren't direct. Now, in response, everybody's wondering about the rest of the project. Bally's was a part of this news release. Their chairman had a quote saying, "We look forward to sharing more on our plan in due course." And it would seem like the next few months will be critical in Bally's coming out with the rest of their renderings. So that's why I suggest we're only seeing 4 things here and now, because maybe there are more, and maybe they're just not ready to be put out. But certainly, whatever remains in terms of the renderings we haven't seen, you'd have to expect that they show you the rest of the site. I'm also a little bit confused. As somebody who's followed this from the very beginning, it was said that the ballpark was going to go on the southeast corner of this square to rectangular plot of land of 35 acres. But right here, if I'm reading and seeing this correct, I'm not reading it, I'm seeing it, it looks like those streaks of light on the bottom there, that's Tropicana, right? The red and white taillights and headlights, which would make sense that MGM is on the right? It's to the north of Trop. And on the other side of the strip, like far away in the distance, that's Excalibur. So it looks to me like the stadium site and project is smack dab either in the middle of the 35 acres or it's on the northwest corner. It definitely does not look like it's in the southeast corner from this perspective. And again, these are all renderings. These are all conceptual by nature. This is not a blueprint, but I'm a little bit confused on its actual location by that image. Here's another takeaway. It's a little bit difficult to determine the field surface geometry. And when I say that, what I mean is the shape of the actual playing surface, not the diamond itself. That has to be regulation up to baseball standards. I mean the shape of the stadium as appropriate to being a multi-purpose event venue. If they are going to have basketball games here, potentially, soccer matches, concerts, other events, it's almost like a baseball stadium itself and its typical traditional dimensions. It doesn't really lend itself to hosting other type events there. Can you fit a football field on this surface if you really wanted to? Now, I know what you're saying. They've got Allegiant Stadium across the way, but maybe in renting out this ballpark and making it a more productive tax-generating machine, you might want to have a college football game or tournament or high school football game or whatever there. So can you actually do those things on this shape of a playing surface? It wasn't really clear. Again, there's only one interior view, and it's from such a low angle, it's really hard to get the overhead perspective of its flexibility. And for better or worse, the A's kind of do need to have a multi-purpose venue theme with this stadium so that they can have the other events there and it generates the tax revenue that it needs. And then the last takeaway here is, are we really looking at a 75% concept design? Because late last summer, that's what the A's said they were going to put out. They needed to put out something that is not just a rendering, but closer to a blueprint to actually give you an idea of cost and of buildability. And it's hard for any of us to know right now, especially with the fluctuation of cost and everything associated with it. The cost is hard to determine at this point. It absolutely is. I think the one thing, though, we can take away is that this does not look done on the cheap, right? This one does not feel any less than $1.5 billion. If that is the absolute maximum that they're trying to spend, if that's the top end of the budget right now, it certainly seems, all things considered, you could cut some corners and do it a lot less than this and maybe try and stay under $1.5 billion. I'm saying that what we're seeing at least looks like a $1.5 billion stadium. So again, those are my takeaways. All of this in pretty instant nature. The renderings only came out several hours ago, but I wanted to give it that time to really understand this, think about it a little bit more, and hopefully give you some deeper level perspectives on what exactly is going on. And one more time, just to say it and make sure this is clear, 4 images, no videos, a little bit of text, but you'd have to think there's a lot more that wasn't released today that does exist that would give you a lot better idea of the project moving forward. You made it here to the end of the video. You know I appreciate that. Thumbs up down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so I can definitely see you back here next time.